The Valori Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their bodies were made of living crystal, tall and beautiful, glowing with inner light. Their queens were treated like gods. Entire planets would bow when a Valori queen passed through their skies. Their ships numbered in the tens of thousands. Their word was law across 100 star systems. But even gods can fall. Queen Isara had ruled for 300 years. She was wise and powerful, her crystalline body shining with a light so bright that lesser beings could not look directly at her. She commanded respect from every corner of the galaxy. But she made one mistake. She trusted the wrong people. Grand Executor Siphon had served her for decades. He smiled at her in council meetings. He praised her decisions in public. But in secret, he gathered her enemies. He whispered lies to the other council members. He promised them power and wealth if they helped him remove the queen. The betrayal came on a quiet night. Lasara was taken from her throne room by her own guards. The council declared her unfit to rule. They stripped her of her titles, her ships, and her authority. In a single night, she went from being the most powerful being in the Orion Arm to being nothing at all. Now Scython faced a problem. He could not kill her. The Valori people loved their queen, even if the council did not. If she died, she would become a martyr. Her supporters would rise up. Wars would follow. He could not imprison her either. Her loyal followers would try to rescue her. That would cause even more trouble. So Scython thought of something crueler, something that would destroy her slowly. Without making her a hero, he would give her to the humans. Humans were the newest species in the galactic community. They had only been traveling between stars for a few hundred years. Their bodies were soft and weak. Their lives were short, rarely lasting more than a century. They controlled only a small piece of one spiral arm. The great empires considered them primitive. It's barely worth noticing. Giving a Valori queen to humans was the greatest insult Scython could imagine. It said that she was worth nothing. It said that even the lowest species in the galaxy was too good for her. He expected the humans to fail her. He expected her to fade away in obscurity, forgotten and alone. He did not understand humans at all. Commander Marcus Cole stood in the diplomatic bay of his ship, the steady horizon. He was 52 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. His ship was not a warship or a diplomatic vessel. It was a freighter designed to carry cargo between distant worlds. Marcus had spent 30 years building his small shipping company. He was not rich or famous. He was just a man who worked hard and tried to do right. The Valori delegation stood before him, tall and gleaming. Their translator device spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. They were presenting a gift to humanity, it said. A gesture of goodwill between their great empire, the young human species. Then they brought her forward. Marcus had expected something impressive. A piece of technology, perhaps. Or some valuable resource. Instead, he saw a small figure barely reaching his chest. She was made of crystal like the others, but there was something terribly wrong. Her body was dull and cracked. Her light was barely visible, flickering weakly like a candle about to go out. She looked like a broken glass statue that someone had thrown away. This was Queen Lasara. Once the most powerful being in 100 star systems, now she could barely stand. The Valori delegates smiled with cold satisfaction. They explained that she was a former royal who needed a new home. They said humans should be honored to receive her. But Marcus heard what they were really saying. They were throwing away their garbage and calling it a gift. The delegates left quickly. They did not want to spend more time with primitive humans than necessary. Marcus watched them go, then looked down at the broken queen standing alone in his cargo bay. She did not look at him. Her cracked eyes stared at the floor. Her dim light flickered with what he recognized as shame. She expected him to reject her. She expected cruelty and mockery. That was all she had known since her fall. Marcus thought about his own life. He thought about raising 3 daughters alone after his wife died of a sickness that better medicine could have cured. He thought about losing his first company to a bad business deal and building a new one from nothing. He thought about all the times he had been knocked down and had to get back up. He knew what it felt like to lose everything. Marcus knelt down so that he was at her eye level. The Valori queen flinched, expecting harsh words. Instead, Marcus spoke softly. I don't know much about your people, he said. I don't understand your politics or your customs, but I can see that you're scared. And I can see that you're alone. She looked up at him. Her cracked eyes met his weathered face. You don't have to be either anymore, he said. For a long moment, she simply stared at him. In 300 years of rule, no one had ever spoken to her like this. Not as a queen to be worshipped. Not as a prisoner to be punished. Just as a person who needed help, she did not know how to respond. So she said nothing. Marcus stood and offered his hand. It was a human gesture that meant nothing in Valori culture. But somehow she understood. He was offering her a choice. She could stay here in the cargo bay alone with her shame. Or she could come with him into the unknown. She took his hand. Her crystalline fingers were cold and rough against his warm skin. But she held on as he led her out of the cargo bay and into the ship. The crew members they passed stared with open curiosity. A Valori on their ship was strange enough. A Valori holding the captain's hand was unheard of. Marcus ignored them all. He led her to a small cabin near his own quarters. It was simple and plain, nothing like the palaces she had known. But it was clean and warm, and the door had a lock on the inside. This is yours, he said. No one will enter without your permission. You can rest here as long as you need. She looked around the tiny room. It was smaller than the closets in her former palace. But something about it felt safer than any throne room she had ever known. She asked. Her voice was weak and broken, like wind through shattered glass. Why would you help me? I am nothing now. I have no power to offer you. No wealth, no influence. The Valori gave me to you as an insult. Do you not understand that? Marcus smiled. It was a kind smile, full of warmth, that she had never seen directed at her before. Where I come from, he said, we don't measure people by what they can give us. We measure them by who they choose to be. And right now, you get to choose who you want to become. That seems pretty valuable to me. He left her alone then, closing the door softly behind him. Lasara stood in the middle of the small cabin, trying to understand what had just happened. She had been given to humans as mockery. She had expected to be ignored or mistreated. Instead, this strange, soft, short-lived creature had shown her something she had never experienced before. Simple kindness. She did not know it yet. But her story was just beginning. The first months were the hardest. Lysara spent most of her time alone in her small cabin. She did not eat because Valori did not need food the way humans did. They fed on starlight and energy, absorbing it through their crystalline bodies. But she barely did even that. She sat in darkness, her light growing dimmer each day. The crew of the Steady Horizon did not know what to make of her. They whispered to each other when they thought no one was listening. Some said she was dangerous, a fallen ruler who might bring trouble to their ship. Others said she was already dying, and they should return her to some Valori outpost before she expired in their care. A few simply felt sorry for her, this broken thing that had once been so powerful. Marcus heard all the whispers. He ignored them. Every morning, he knocked on her door. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she did not. When she did open the door, he would simply tell her what was happening on the ship that day. He told her about the cargo they were carrying. He told her about the planets they were visiting. He told her small stories about his crew, their hopes and their troubles. She rarely responded, but she listened. Marcus noticed that she watched everything. When he repaired broken equipment in the corridors, her dim eyes followed his hands. When he settled arguments between crew members, she tilted her head as if recording every word. When the ship passed through beautiful nebulae or near interesting stars, she would drift to the observation windows and stare for hours. She was not dying, he realized. She was waiting. Waiting to see if this was real or just another trick. One evening, Marcus sat in the common area, reading aloud from an old book. It was something his late wife used to love, a collection of earth poetry from centuries past. He read it to remember her, to feel close to her even though she was gone. He did not know, that Lasara had drifted to the doorway and was listening. The next evening, he read again. This time, he saw her shadow in the hallway. The evening after that, he placed a chair near the doorway. She took it, sitting just outside the room, listening to words she did not fully understand, but found strangely beautiful. After a week of this, Marcus decided it was time to teach her more. He started with human history, not the proud stories of conquest and empire that the Valor loved. Instead, he told her stories of people who had lost everything and built something new. He told her about leaders who were thrown out of power and came back stronger. Told her about ordinary people who had nothing but their determination and how they changed the world. Lasara was confused by these stories. In Valore culture, power was everything. If you had power, you were valuable. If you lost power, you were nothing. A fallen queen was supposed to fade away and die. That was the natural order. That was how things had always been, but humans did not think this way. Marcus told her about a man named Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned for 27 years and emerged to lead his nation. He told her about refugees who fled their destroyed homes with nothing and built new lives in strange lands. He told her about scientists who failed 1,000 times before succeeding, about artists who were mocked their whole lives and became legends after death. Your people measure worth by power, Marcus said one night, but we measure worth by something else. We measure it by what you do when you have no power, by how you treat others when you have nothing to gain, by whether you keep going when everything tells you to stop. Lasara thought about this for a long time. It makes no sense, she finally said. If you have no power, you cannot do anything. You are nothing. Marcus smiled. That's what everyone said about humans when we first reached the stars. We were nothing. Small, weak, short-lived. But we didn't listen. We kept going anyway. And now look at us. He gestured around the ship. It was not much, just a simple freighter. But it was his. He had built it from nothing after losing everything. It carried goods and hope to distant worlds. It gave jobs to people who needed them. It was small, but it was real. You don't need permission to matter, he said. You just need to decide that you do. That night, alone in her cabin, Lysera thought about his words. She thought about her whole life, all 300 years of it. She had been born into power. She had never earned anything. Everything had been given to her because of what she was, not who she was. And when what she was got taken away, she had nothing left but this human, this strange, short-lived creature, was telling her something different. He was saying that who she was mattered more than what she was. He was saying that her story could continue, even though her power was gone. She did not believe him. Not yet. But for the first time since her fall, she felt something other than despair. She felt curious. The next morning, she did something she had never done before. She left her cabin and walked to the cargo bay where the crew was working. They all stopped and stared at her, this cracked and dimming queen standing among crates and machinery. I would like to help, she said. The crew members looked at each other in confusion. A Valori queen working? It was unheard of. It was impossible. Queens did not work. Queens commanded others to work for them. Marcus appeared behind her, a small smile on his face. Well, he said to his crew, you heard her. Find her something to do. He gave her a simple task, organizing inventory records. It was work that any low-level crew member could do. For a queen, it should have been insulting. But Lysara took to it with intense focus. She learned the computer systems. She asked questions about the cargo. She made notes about ways to improve the organization. When she finished, she asked for more work. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Lysara became part of the crew. She was not their leader. She was not their queen. She was just another person doing her share, learning and growing alongside them. And as she worked, as she connected with others, something began to change. The cracks in her crystalline body started to heal. Her light, which had been fading toward death, began to glow stronger. It was not the blinding radiance of her old power. It was something softer and warmer, like a candle instead of a star. One night, Marcus found her standing at the observation window, watching the stars drift by. Her light was steady now, gentle and warm. "Why do you waste your time on me?" she asked without turning around. "I understand kindness to strangers, but you have given me months of your life. You have taught me and guided me. Why?" Marcus stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. "Because where I come from, we don't believe anyone's story is finished until they say it is." "You didn't say it was finished?" "You kept listening. You kept watching. You kept waiting for something, even when you didn't know what it was." He looked at her, at the soft light now glowing from her healing body. "I think you're starting to find it." Lysara did not respond, but for the first time since her fall, she smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible on her crystalline face, but it was real, and it was hers. She was not the queen she used to be. She did not know what she was becoming, but she was becoming something. That was more than she had ever hoped for. Marcus smiled back. They stood there together, Human and Valori, watching the stars pass by. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Some things did not require words. The journey was just beginning. 3 years had passed since. The Valori Empire had thrown away their queen. The steady horizon was still flying, still carrying cargo across the distant reaches of space. But everything else had changed. The crew had grown closer, like a family bound by shared hardship and shared purpose. And at the center of that family, no longer hiding in shadows, was Lysara. She was not the same being who had arrived broken and dimming in their cargo bay. Her crystalline body had healed completely. The cracks were gone. Her light glowed steady and warm, not the blinding radiance of old royalty, but something gentler and somehow stronger. She moved differently now, with purpose and confidence that came not from power over others, but from knowing her own worth. She worked alongside the crew every day, not because anyone forced her to, not because she was trying to prove something. She worked because she wanted to. She had discovered that there was satisfaction in labor, in completing tasks with her own hands, in being useful to others. Marcus had stopped taking easy contracts. Safe cargo runs between wealthy worlds paid well, but they did not need the steady horizon. There were plenty of ships for that work. Instead, Marcus took the jobs that others refused. The difficult jobs, the dangerous jobs, the jobs that mattered. They carried medical supplies to colonies struck by disease. They evacuated refugees from war zones where larger ships would not go. They delivered food to stations that had been forgotten by the great powers. They went where they were needed, not where they would profit most. Lysara threw herself to this work with all her heart, on a plague colony in the outer systems. She walked through quarantine zones that made the human crew nervous. Her crystalline body could not catch human diseases, so she carried medicine to the sick while the others coordinated from outside. She held the hands of dying people and told them they were not alone. On a refugee ship fleeing from a border conflict, she helped organize thousands of displaced people. She found families that had been separated. She made sure children were fed. She sat with frightened people and listened to their stories, giving them the simple gift of being heard. On a lawless frontier station, she mediated a dispute between two trading groups that had been ready to kill each other. She did not command them or threaten them. She simply listened to both sides, asked careful questions, and helped them find a solution that worked for everyone. Word began to spread. Traders, who traveled between the stars, carried stories with them. They spoke of a strange ship called the Steady Horizon that appeared in places of trouble. They spoke of its human captain who never turned away from those in need. And they spoke of something even stranger, a Valori who worked and served alongside the humans. A Valori who laughed and cried and admitted mistakes. A Valori who asked questions instead of giving orders. Some said she was a refugee, escaped from the Empire. Others said she was a criminal, hiding from Valori justice. A few whispered the truth, that she was the fallen queen, the one who had been given to humans as an insult. But whatever they believed about her past, they all agreed on one thing. She was different from any Valori they had ever met. She was not cold and distant. She was not proud and commanding. She was warm and present. She was kind. On distant stations, people began to ask for her by name. Traders would change their routes, hoping to cross paths with the steady horizon. Refugees who had been helped by her told their families, and those families told others. Her reputation grew not through conquest or power, but through 1,000 small acts of service. Marcus watched all of this with quiet pride. He had known from the beginning that there was something special in her. He had seen it in the way she watched and listened, in the curiosity that survived even her deepest despair. He had simply given her the space to discover it for herself. One evening, after a particularly difficult mission helping earthquake survivors on a mining colony, Marcus and Lysara sat together in the ship's small common area. The rest of the crew had gone to sleep, exhausted from days of hard work. But neither of them could rest yet. "Do you miss it?" Marcus asked. "Miss what?" "Being queen. Having all that power. Being worshipped by millions?" Lysara was quiet for a moment. Her light flickered as she thought about the question. "I miss nothing about it," she finally said. "I thought I would. I thought losing power would feel like losing myself. But I was wrong. The power was never really me. It was just something I wore, like clothing. When it was taken away, I discovered that there was nothing. Underneath, I had no self. I had no purpose. I was empty." She looked at her hands, crystalline and glowing softly. "You helped me fill that emptiness. It's not with power, but with something better. With purpose, with connection. With the understanding that I can matter without commanding anyone." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's a human idea, you know. We've never had much power compared to the great empires. So we had to find other ways to matter, other ways to measure ourselves." "It is a good idea," Lysara said. "I wish my people understood it." Far away, on the Valori throne world, Grand Executor Scython sat in his council chamber and read reports that made him uneasy. The broken queen was supposed to be dead by now, or at least forgotten, faded into obscurity among the primitive humans. That was the whole point of giving her away. She was supposed to prove that power lost was power gone forever. She was supposed to be a warning to anyone who might challenge Scython's rule. Instead, she was becoming famous, not powerful, not dangerous, but something worse. She was becoming loved. Across the frontier regions, in places far from Valori influence, beings of all species spoke her name with warmth and respect. They did not fear her, they admired her. They wanted to be like her. This was not supposed to happen. In 12,000 years of Valore history, no fallen royal had ever recovered. They were supposed to fade and die, consumed by the shame of losing power. That was the natural order. But Lysara was not fading. She was growing stronger. She was spreading ideas that Scythan found deeply troubling. Ideas about service and humility. Ideas about measuring worth by actions rather than power. Ideas that came from humans. If those ideas spread to the Valori population, they could be dangerous. They could make people question whether the current rulers deserved their power. They could make people wonder if there was a better way. Scython closed the report and stared at the wall. He had made a mistake, had underestimated the humans. He had underestimated what simple kindness could accomplish. And most of all, he had underestimated the queen he had thrown away. But it was not too late to fix the mistake. The galaxy was large, and accidents happened all the time. Ships disappeared. The crews vanished. Troublesome exiles could be silenced if one was careful about it. Scythan began to make plans. Back on the steady horizon, Lysara and Marcus sat in comfortable silence, unaware of the danger forming in distant halls of power. They did not know that their good work had attracted attention. Did not know that powerful beings were watching them with hostile eyes. All they knew was that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people to help, new chances to make a difference, and they would face those challenges together as they had for 3 years now. "Thank you," Lysara said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me when I could see nothing in myself. For believing I could be more than what I was. For teaching me that falling is not the same as ending." Marcus smiled his warm, tired smile. "You did the hard part yourself. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." Lysara returned his smile, her light glowing softly in the dim room. Neither of them knew what was coming. Neither of them knew that their greatest test still lay ahead. But they were ready, even if they did not know it yet. They had found something worth protecting. They had found each other. They had found a purpose bigger than themselves. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 7 years had passed since Lysara first set foot on the steady horizon. In that time, she had traveled to hundreds of worlds. She had helped thousands of people. She had learned more about life and meaning and purpose than she had in 3 centuries of sitting on a throne. The frightened, dimming queen who had arrived as an insult was gone. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had earned every bit of the respect she now received. Marcus was older now, his hair completely white, his movements slower than before. But his eyes still held the same warmth, the same quiet strength that had saved her all those years ago. He had become more than a teacher to her. He had become family. Then the news came. The Valori Empire was falling apart. Grand Executor Sithin, who had schemed and betrayed his way to power, had finally been consumed by his own methods. The council. Members he had used to overthrow Lysara had turned on each other. Alliances shattered. Factions formed. The great empire that had ruled for 12,000 years descended into chaos. Reports flooded in from across Valori space. Warships fighting each other in orbit around ancient homeworlds. Planets declaring independence. Civilian populations fleeing the violence. Ancient enemies of the Valori, sensing weakness and beginning to circle like predators around wounded prey. An emergency summit was called on neutral ground. Representatives from every major galactic power gathered to address the crisis. The Valori factions were commanded to attend and choose a leader, someone who could reunite their broken empire and restore stability to the region. Marcus received an invitation to attend as an observer. Human shipping companies had business, interests throughout Valori space, and the major powers wanted all perspectives represented. He could have ignored the invitation. It was not his fight. But Lysara asked him to go, and she asked to go with him. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "These are the people who threw you away, the people who tried to destroy you. Walking into that summit could be dangerous." Lysara nodded. "I know, but I cannot hide forever. My people are suffering. If there is anything I can do to help them, I must try." So they went. The summit hall was massive, designed to accommodate hundreds of delegations from dozens of species. Representatives from the great powers sat in elevated positions around the room. Below them, on the main floor, the Valori faction leaders had gathered. They were all that remained of Scython's council and the warlords who had risen in the chaos. Each claimed the right to rule. Each distrusted all the others. When Marcus and Lysara entered, the hall fell silent. The Valori faction leaders recognized her immediately. Her crystalline faces showed shock, then contempt. The broken queen. Had returned the exile they had given to humans as garbage? What was she doing here? One of the faction leaders, a tall crystalline figure named Vareth, stepped forward. His light blazed with authority and anger. "This creature has no place here," he announced. "She was cast out. She is nothing. She has no power, no ships, no territory. By what right does she stand among us?" Murmurs of agreement came from the other faction leaders. They had all benefited from Lysara's fall. They had all built their power on the foundation of her destruction. Her presence reminded them of their own crimes. Lysara stood calmly, her soft light steady and unchanged. "I do not claim any right to stand among you," she said. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the vast hall. "I am not here to take power. I am not here to command. I am here because my people are dying, and I cannot stand by and do nothing." Vareth laughed, a cold, crystalline sound. "Your people? You have no people. You are an exile, a disgrace. You have spent 7 years living among primitives, doing the work of servants. What could you possibly offer us?" "I offer nothing," Lysara replied. "But I would like to ask a question." The hall waited in tense silence. "In the 7 years since I was cast out, what have you built? What have you created? What have you given to our people except more war, more suffering, more death? You claim the right to rule, but ruling is not just about power. It is about service. It is about making life better for those who depend on you." What service have you provided? The faction leaders shifted uncomfortably. They had no good answer. They had spent 7 years fighting each other for control, not helping their people. Vareth snarled. Service? That is human talk. That is the philosophy of slaves. We are Valori. We rule through strength, through power, through dominance. And where has that brought us? Lasara asked. Look around you. Our empire is burning. Our people are refugees. Our enemies gather at our borders. 12,000 years of power, and this is the result. She stepped forward, her light growing slightly brighter. I have spent 7 years learning a different way, not from conquering, but from serving. Not from commanding, but from listening. I have held the hands of dying strangers. I have carried medicine through plague zones. I have helped refugees find new homes. I have learned that strength does not come from power over others. It comes from power for others. The faction leaders stared at her as if she had gone mad. Then Marcus stepped forward. If I may, he said, his old voice steady and calm. The fallen queen says she has nothing to offer. But I know many who would disagree. With your permission, I would like to call some witnesses. Before anyone could object, Marcus activated a communication device. One by one, figures appeared on the holographic displays around the hall. A trader from the frontier regions spoke first. He told of how Lasara had negotiated peace between his community and their rivals, saving dozens of lives. A refugee mother appeared next, holding her child. She told of how Lasara had personally found her family when they were separated during an evacuation. A doctor from a plague colony described how Lasara had worked beside him for days, never resting, never complaining, helping save hundreds of patients. More witnesses followed. Scientists she had supported, captains she had assisted, leaders she had advised, common people whose lives she had touched. One after another, they told their stories. 100 voices from a dozen species, all saying the same thing. This queen had earned their respect not through power, but through service. The hall fell silent when the last witness finished. Lasara looked at the faction leaders, at the representatives of the great powers, at everyone who had gathered to decide the fate of her people. I do not ask for a throne, she said. I do not want to rule as queens have ruled before. I ask only for the chance to serve my people the way this human taught me to serve. Not through power over others, but through power for others. She turned to face Marcus, her light glowing warm and steady. I was given to humans as mockery. The Valore thought it was the greatest insult they could offer, but it was the greatest gift I have ever received. These humans, these beings you call primitive and short-lived, they taught me what it means to truly lead, and I will carry that lesson for the rest of my existence. The great hall was completely silent. The faction leaders had no response. They had come prepared to fight for power, to argue and threaten and scheme. They had not prepared for this. They had not prepared for a queen who did not want to rule, but wanted to serve. They had not prepared for witnesses who spoke of kindness and sacrifice. They had not prepared for a human philosophy that valued dignity over dominance. Finally, the chief representative of the neutral powers stood. It seems, she said slowly, that we have much to discuss. The summit continued for many hours after that, but something had changed. The faction leaders still argued and schemed, but their words sounded hollow now. Everyone in the hall had seen something they could not forget. They had seen a different kind of strength, and they had seen where it came from in an old human standing beside a queen who had learned that crowns mean nothing. Service means everything. Lasara did not become empress. When the summit finally ended, after days of negotiation and debate, the Valori factions agreed on something that had never happened before in their 12,000-year history. They would not choose a supreme ruler. They would not crown another queen or appoint another executor. Instead, they would try something different. They created a new position, one that Lasara designed herself. They called it First Servant of the Valori people. The title told everyone exactly what it meant. Not First Ruler, not First Commander. First Servant. the one who serves before all others, the one who puts the people first. Lasara accepted the position, but only on her own terms. She would hold no armies. She would command no fleets. She would occupy no palace. She would have no power to force anyone to do anything. Her only authority would be moral authority earned through action, not inherited through birth. The faction leaders agreed because they thought it was meaningless. A leader without power? That was no leader at all. They would let her have her empty title while they continued fighting for real control. They were wrong. Lasara began traveling across Valori's space. Not on a warship, but on the steady horizon, the same simple freighter that had been her home for 7 years. She went to the places that needed help most. Refugee camps, destroyed colonies, starving stations, war-torn worlds. Everywhere she went, she did the same thing. She listened. She asked questions. She learned what people needed. Then she worked with local leaders to find solutions. She did not give orders. She made suggestions. She connected people who could help each other. She inspired by example. The results were slow at first. The Valori were not used to this kind of leadership. For 12,000 years, they had waited for commands from above. They had expected rulers to solve their problems for them. Lasara told them something different. She told them they had the power to solve their own problems. She was just there to help. Some listened. Some did not. But those who listened found that she was right. Communities began to rebuild themselves. Factions that had been fighting found ways to cooperate. Former enemies discovered that they needed each other to survive. Word spread. More and more Valori wanted to hear what the first servant had to say. Her methods were strange, but they worked. And there was something about her that people found irresistible. She was warm where other leaders were cold. She was humble where others were proud. She admitted when she was wrong and asked for help when she needed it. These were human qualities. The Valori had never seen them in one of their own before. The faction leaders grew worried. They had expected Lasara to fail, to prove that leadership without power was impossible. Instead, she was succeeding. People were following her not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. That was far more dangerous than any army, but there was nothing they could do. Lasara held no power they could take. She controlled no territory they could conquer. Her strength came from something they could not touch. It came from love. Years passed. One by one, the faction leaders faded away. Some died in their endless conflicts. Others lost the support of their people. A few actually changed, inspired by Lasara's example to try a different way. The Valori Empire, which had seemed on the verge of destruction, slowly transformed into something new. They called it the Valori Covenant. It was not an empire ruled by force. It was a community bound by choice. Local leaders made decisions for their own people. Regional councils coordinated larger issues. And at the center, traveling constantly, connecting everyone together, was the first servant. Other species began to take notice. The Valori had been feared for millennia. Now they were becoming something else. They were becoming admired. Delegations from distant powers came to study this strange new form of government. They came to meet the queen who had given up her throne and found something greater. They called it the human philosophy. Leadership through service. Strength through humility. Power through connection rather than domination. The ideas spread beyond Valori space. Carried by travelers and traders who had seen what one broken queen and one simple human had built together. Marcus did not live to see all of this. He grew old, as humans do. His white hair thinned. His strong hands weakened. His steady steps became slow and uncertain. But his eyes never lost their warmth, and his smile never faded. Lasara stayed with him as much as she could. Even with all her responsibilities, even with millions of people depending on her, she always returned to the steady horizon. She always returned to the man who had saved her. On his final day, Marcus lay in a medical bay on the Valori homeworld. It was an honor never given to any human before. The Valori healers did everything they could, but human bodies were not meant to last forever. Some things even the most advanced medicine could not fix. Lasara sat beside him, holding his weathered hand in her crystalline fingers. Her light was brilliant now, but she dimmed it in the small room, making it soft and warm, like the sunlight he had loved on distant Earth. "Did I do all right?" Marcus asked. His voice was thin, barely more than a whisper. Lasara felt tears forming in her eyes. Tears of liquid light. Another thing she had learned from humans. The Valori were not supposed to cry. They were supposed to be above such emotional displays. But Lasara was not that kind of Valori anymore. "You gave me everything," she said. "When I had nothing, you gave me hope. When I was broken, you showed me how to heal. When I thought my story was over, you taught me it was just beginning." Marcus smiled, his familiar smile. "You did the hard part yourself," he said. "I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." "No," Lasara whispered. "You handed me something higher than any throne. You handed me purpose." His eyes closed slowly. His breathing grew shallow. But his hand still held hers, and he was still smiling. "Then I did all right," he said softly. A few moments later, he was gone. When Marcus Cole died, every light in the Valori Covenant dimmed in mourning. It was a gesture usually reserved for fallen queens. For the first time in history, it honored a human. The people wanted to build statues. They wanted to create monuments and name planets after him. Lysara refused. Marcus would have hated that, she told them. He never wanted glory. He never wanted to be remembered as anything special. Instead, she created the Cole Foundation. Its mission was simple. Find the broken. Find the dismissed. Find the forgotten. Find the people that everyone else has given up on. And show them what one human showed a fallen queen, that no one's story is finished until, they say it is, the foundation spread across the galaxy. It helped refugees and exiles. It supported people who had lost everything. It trained leaders in the human philosophy of service. It carried Marcus's legacy to places he had never visited, to people he had never met. Centuries later, Lysara still served her people. The Valori lived long lives, and she had many years ahead of her. She never took a throne. She never claimed power. She remained the first servant until the end, for days. But she kept one small reminder of the human who had changed everything. In her quarters, wherever she traveled, she kept an old book of Earth's poetry. The pages were worn and faded, barely holding together. But she could still read the words that Marcus had read to her so many years ago. Sometimes, late at night, she would read aloud from those ancient pages. And she would remember a simple freighter captain who saw a broken queen and chose kindness, who taught her that falling was not the same as ending, who showed her that the measure of a person was not the power they held, but the good they chose to do. The galaxy remembered him, not as a conqueror or a king, not as a warrior or a genius. They remembered him as the human who raised a fallen queen higher than any throne, and that, in the end, was more than enough. On quiet nights, when the stars drifted slowly past her windows, Lasara would sometimes speak to him. She knew he could not hear her. She knew humans did not live on after death the way some species believed, but she spoke anyway because it helped her remember. "Thank you," she would whisper, "for everything." And somewhere, in the vast silence between stars, she liked to imagine he was smiling. The story ended as it began, with kindness, with hope, with the simple truth that Marcus Cole had taught her on the first day they met. No one's story is finished until they say it is. Lasara's story continued for many more centuries. But that first chapter, the chapter written by a human who refused to see her as broken, remained the most important. It was the chapter that changed everything. It was the chapter that proved what humans could do, not through power, not through conquest, not through force, through something much stronger, through love.